This is episode number 127, featuring a panel discussion about the PleinAir movement, its status, and its future, with special guests Al Bond and Jess Bellis of the Avalon Foundation. They produce PleinAir Easton. Jean Stern from the Irvine Museum, one of the world's leading experts on plein air painting. Elaine and Peter Adams, also experts and people who run the California Art Club. You don't want to miss this.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir Podcast. Man, almost a month has passed since the PleinAir convention. I am still on this massive high. I can live off that energy and all those hugs for a whole year. I look forward to that so much. Thank you so much for being there. What was amazing to me is that we had announced on Saturday of the PleinAir convention, the last indoor day, we had announced where we're going for the following year. 50% of the people in the room, 50% signed up on the spot, because we offer a special discount to them that nobody else gets. They signed up on the spot. And by Wednesday that same week, just Wednesday after Saturday, we had sold 72% of the convention. So it looks like Colorado is going to be pretty popular. We're going to be staying in Denver, and we have a very reasonably priced hotel, which cannot be announced until exactly 1 year from the date. And then they'll open it up for the discounts. That's why you're not seeing that on the website. Anyway, we're going to paint in the Red Rocks, the Rocky Mountain National Park, and some other iconic spots. It's going to be beautiful. Plan your trip now. We have a pre-convention workshop with, drum roll please, Scott Christensen. Yeah, and he's going to be on the main stage. And because we had a record number of watercolorists come this year, we have another major watercolorist who's going to be doing a pre-convention workshop, and that's Thomas Schaller. And Joe Zabukvich, I always get his name wrong, said he had so much fun at the PleinAir convention. He never returns to the same place twice for many, many years. And he asked that he could come back next year. So we're having him back next year too. And we're working on a little something special for watercolorists, which we'll announce later. Also, I want to mention to you that we've got this cool thing going on in Europe. A couple seats are still left. Our magazine, Fine Art Connoisseur, which is the sister publication to PleinAir magazine, both of which you should subscribe to, does an annual trip where we go behind the scenes at major museums. We go to homes of collectors, homes of artists, collections and art studios in Europe. We have these private events. So like we had a private event twice in the Hermitage. We had the whole Hermitage in Russia to ourselves 2 different times. We had a private event back in the archives of the Van Gogh Museum where the directors met with us and talked to us privately in a conference room. We met, we went to artists' homes and saw their personal collections. We went to Alphonse Mucha's home where his son and his wife, now 90 years old, lived, and they showed us his belongings, his personal collection, things that had never been seen by public eyes. We also went this last year, we were in the Sistine Chapel, and we had the whole Sistine Chapel unheard of to ourselves for a whole hour with the lights on. It was incredible. So this is a special trip. This fall, we're going to Provence and Nice in France, and we're going to cover the area and the track of Cézanne and Van Gogh and many of the other Impressionists, and we're doing some amazing things around there. We're going to be in Provence and Nice and some of that area. And so it's going to be really, really beautiful time of year. Fall is beautiful there. And then we're doing a post trip for those who want to continue on with us. We're going to Edinburgh, Scotland, and you can see the art there, which is cool. And this is really kind of a collector's trip, but a lot of the people on the trip are artists. And sometimes, usually they bring a spouse with them or a friend with them or a partner. But this is not a painting trip, although several of us use our free time to paint. Usually there's some shopping time or something, we go painting. And then we're going to do this year a 3-day painting trip before this trip in France for those of us who are painters. So you can learn more about all this at finearttrip.com. It's coming up in October, I believe. So make sure you check that out. Also, coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering art marketing questions that were given to me from people at the Plein Convention. We recorded this panel live at the Plein Convention. It's a panel discussion about the Plein movement and its future. And I wanted to get people who are highly influential in this, who have a stake in the game. So we asked for the people from Plenary Easton, which is one of the biggest shows out there, Al Bond and Jessica Bellis from the Avalon Foundation, to join us. We have Jean Stern, who is one of the great experts in plein air painting historically and about this movement from the Irvine Museum. And then we have Elaine and Peter Adams, the CEO and the president of the California Art Club, which is, of course, huge in the movement. So this is the recording from the convention. So this is episode number 127 of the Plein Air podcast, featuring a panel discussion of the plein air movement and its future, with special guests Al Bond and Jessica Bellis of the Avalon Foundation, which of course creates Plein Easton. It is also, we have Jean Stern from the Irvine Museum at the University of California, Irvine, and Elaine and Peter Adams from the California Art Club, and we are live at the Plein Air Convention. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us to be together, and thank you all for coming in and doing this. I will tell you something right now, because I'll forget to say it later. At the encouragement of these two people, we have created a new track for next year. And the new track is going to be a track especially for people who organize plein air events. And the reason we want to do that is because these people are all very gracious to share their best practices. They know that the tide lifts all ships. These organizations, these shows are not competitive. They're supportive of one another. And so we're going to set up a separate room and a separate track, invite there's probably over 250 shows now, invite these people to come in and attend the convention. They can also participate as a whole, but then they can get together and work on the movement. I don't want to say the industry, but the movement as a whole. How can we grow and best practices? What I'd like to do is, rather than going through bios and so on, which they can find in the programs, I'd like to start with, what is your thought on the state of the plein air world? And ladies first.
Oh. Well, having the experience over the years, I've been able to watch how the plein air movement has developed. And I could tell you that it has gotten a lot stronger. A lot of doors have opened where museums are now collecting contemporary plein air works. Certainly the historic plein air works that Jean Stern with the Irvine Museum brought to everyone's attention globally has really helped launch the interest in the philosophy and the technique of plein air painting. I see schools opening, students studying, it now being available as a course in many different art schools. And where I remember about 15 years ago going to a very prominent art school and telling them that many of their students are coming to the California Art Club asking for plein air training. And they said, oh yes, we've had a few people asking us, but we're not going to provide that. But now they do, actually, that one school. So it's really great. I think once they're teaching, and we see, of course, collecting audiences starting to take an interest, secondary markets taking an interest, primary markets being galleries, more and more taking an interest. So I think it is definitely, I see a strong movement. And I see that what's key is the new generations coming in and wanting to practice plein air skills. So I definitely see a growth that is just now taking a really solid root. So I don't see it dying out. I actually do see it really becoming more solidified and growing.
So we'll just go down the row here. Peter.
Eric, thank you for asking us to be here. This is a great event, and this is our 5th time out of the 8 PleinAir conventions, and we're very honored to be here again. You know what interests me about the PleinAir movement and about any movement is the serendipitous things that happen that strengthen the movement. For example, the California Art Club, which was founded in 1909, was started by the early California PleinAir painters, Edgar Payne, William Wendt, Guy Rose. But pretty soon, Hollywood artists got involved. Emil Cosa Jr., and they added an extra element. A few years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the Chinese got involved with the California Art Club and strengthened it because of their academic training, and we'd all go out painting, we'd learn from one another. It was just wonderful. In fact, I just came back from China. I was there with Jason C2 and me and C2 and Michael C2, who's here, and they do trips all the time. We do PleinAir painting all over China. We exhibit all over China. PleinAir is really big in China. And I want to say with Jessica and Al doing what they're doing in Maryland, this is a fantastic way to reinforce our strength, and it's happening. It's happening, and it's so exciting to have a nationwide movement going on, and that we're all supporting one another, and the whole thing is growing. And now we're moving into Europe too. There are the workshops in France with Julie, and now with Miles Copeland, and we're just so excited about the whole thing. But what excites me is, and I think what's going to really strengthen the movement, is something that we don't even expect will happen. Some people, somewhere will get involved, and maybe some of the people out there will get involved and really help the movement grow even more. And so I'm excited about that.
Jessica.
Well, I thank you so much for having us here, and it is such an honor to serve on a panel like this and to be here in California and share time with so many great artists that are here. I echo what Elaine said. The state of PleinAir is very strong. Somebody said I should say that when I'm up here. And I think that it really is. We've seen the same kind of growth. We've seen international growth. We get hundreds of applications every year from all corners of the world. The only continent I don't have an application from is Antarctica. So I continue to look for a PleinAir painter in Antarctica to apply so that we can say that we've had applications from.
Well, that's good news, is because I was looking at the metrics on the PleinAir podcast, which is basically in pretty much every country in the world now listening. And I did see someone on there from Antarctica.
So good. Oh. So we're talking to you, buddy. We're talking to you. Apply to PleinAir Easton. I think that the movement is growing. I think that in terms of the future, I got the privilege to listen to the PleinAir Train panel yesterday. And I think that one of the new things that is happening more and more is that PleinAir is being used as a communication tool, as a tool to uplift communities. When you talk about a social movement, then there's change, there's positive impact. And we've got projects like we're building a permanent collection of agricultural paintings to help the farming community that is local to us advocate for themselves. They're using the paintings as a communication tool to talk to the legislature. It'll be exhibited both in the Maryland State House, and our goal is to get it to be an exhibition at Congress. I think that it's just, you guys, the artists here, have such great talent. And what you're doing is you are capturing the beauty that a lot of people take for granted and they can't see. And the landscape is fleeting and changing always. And I think that the movement, what it's doing is it's documenting those changes, and it's connecting people who aren't necessarily art lovers or maybe have never had original artwork on their walls. Like, that connection is really taking hold.
Okay.
Because PleinAir is becoming a word that people know, not just the ones who should know it, like in the schools, but the farmers know what the word is now.
Well, what I think is interesting, when we first started the magazine and called it PleinAir Magazine, nobody knew the term. And yet Plein magazine today is the #1 selling art magazine, and in the art photography category, #1 selling in the world, in the nation at Barnes & Noble. And so, and Barnes & Noble loves us because of that, because it sells a lot of magazines. But it's interesting that nobody knows this term, but they're picking it up because they see the pretty pictures on the cover, and then they're learning the term.
But again, I think that that's the big change that's happened in the last 15 years since Planar Easton started is, again, the clerks at the grocery store know what the word is.
Right.
You know, I think it's a big deal, certainly in Maryland, and I think, you know, there's East Coast representation here, but I think that there's a really powerful Plein community that's on the East Coast that is pushing boundaries and exploring the limits of Plein painting. It's very exciting, and again, it's very connective to the individual communities.
Al?
Well, I'll reiterate what everybody has said, but thank you for putting this panel together. I think we are at a time when it is important to demonstrate a little bit of leadership, and so. In part because there are all these people who we've captured the imagination and attention of, and I'll give you 2 examples. Our juror this year is a man named Dan Weiss, who is the president and CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, one of the top museums on the globe, and he is interested in Plein Easton and Plein painting. Our judge this year is a man named David Levy, who really spent his entire career, his entire lifetime actually, his parents were artists, in modernism. He took the Parsons School of Design, which is about to go out of business when he first got involved in it, and turned it into the phenomenal educational behemoth that it is today, and then he went on to run the Corcoran Gallery for a number of years in Washington, D.C. That's our judge. These are not the people that are normally looking at plein air and seeing it in elevated terms, and that is a change moment.
It is a huge change.
So, we have to both acknowledge that that is happening, and also really consider how do we ensure that the work that the people out here, because I'm not an artist, are producing is actually seen for what it is. And that has been a sort of singular focus for Plenary Easton since the beginning. Our job is to create the environment in which the public can see the excellence of the painting. And also to ensure that the people that we're showing, are able to produce excellence. Right. So we're a juried competition. That's why we need these judge folks. We think a lot about making sure that the quality of everything matters. The quality of the work matters, but the quality of everything that we do around that work is essential so that people can open their eyes and see what it is. And I think that's happening in a big way. And, from my perspective, why am I here? It is to encourage that, relentless pursuit of excellence, both among other festivals and also, I think among artists. Yep. And, if you are one of the top painters out there, and there's definitely a bunch of them that are attending and then faculty here, help your neighbor out who's just starting up. Really help them in guidance and career guidance as well as painting guidance, because that's how we make this thing sustainable in the long term. I think that, and just what happens in all art is innovation, and there has to be innovation. And so I think a lot as an organizer about how do we build an environment where the artist gets to create, and the way that they're judged is in such a way that they're rewarded for taking risks instead of pushed down. I don't really care where the, where that innovation leads. There's a public that is going to decide whether they value it. Right. And there are artists who are out there trying to figure out what the next thing or the next way of approaching their subject is. But I want to make a place that is safe for them.
Jean?
Well, I've always believed that if people see these paintings, they'll love them. The best thing about plein air, objective, realist type painting is that they're viewer friendly. You don't need somebody to tell you what you're looking at. Plus, they reach each and every one of us at a very deep level that connects us to nature. And that's very important to me and to people and to everybody in this room. When I first joined the California Art Club 27 years ago, I did a lecture. There were maybe 80 people, and I was like 90% of the club. And these two people came and built it into what it is today. I had the extreme honor of being a juror judge at Easton, and everybody knows Easton. These people have done a fantastic job of making plein air popular, especially in the East. Most people think, well, it's only in the West, but it's all over the country. Right. Then 22 years ago, I joined the Laguna Plein Air Painters Association, and they started doing their very important invitational that drew lots and lots of people. And 14 years ago, Maui Plein Air started. So everybody wants to go to Maui, but there are plein air organizations all over. I saw a map that you produced of all the plein air events that are happening in the country, and it's staggering.
I got grief because I missed Minnesota.
And Antarctica, too.
Yeah.
I think those penguins would love to see the penguins.
The one guy out in the freezing cold.
But really,
he can't believe his coverage today.
The element that's very important is to reach the public. And this is the gentleman that's doing it. Right. And he has brought everybody here together. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. These people, they're dedicated to art. We all are. But we are here because of Eric and because of his magazine. Plein Air magazine is just a fantastic way to get information out. So plein air, as I said, if people see it, they'll love it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I think our role is to be reflective. We're being more of a reflector than we are leading a movement. So I appreciate that, but I think it's about all of us, quite frankly. So what are the issues that we face? I think you know a lot about art movements. You're a historian. What are the issues we face? What do we need to do to keep this healthy and strong and growing? And how do we do it? Anybody want to touch on that? Yeah.
Two things. First of all, I think one thing that Al brought up and that John brought up too. Al, you said leadership, and John, you said that we're user-friendly.
Viewer-friendly.
Yeah. Well, no, that is the face of plein air painting, is it's friendly. And you are friendly. I mean, you say you're reflective, but you're the leader. You are a leader, and you are a very friendly guy. And outdoor plein air painting is a really fun thing to do, and it's very friendly, and it's very welcoming to other people. You're out in the environment. You're in nature. You know, what could be a better place? You're you know, in a way, it's almost like a religious experience. And people go out and they do that, and they love it, and they just fall in love with it, and it feeds their souls. And that's really important. That's one of the most important things I think about the plein air movement. But the second thing is museums. And Al, you spoke about the director of the Metropolitan Museum being your juror. And of course, John, you are a museum director. And to get the museums involved, which we're starting to do now, as I think very important, because that's going to give the plein air movement more authenticity, more credibility.
I think that's huge. Having people like that who may or may not be aware of what's going on, to pull them in and then to see the movement it's going to make them aware.
Right.
And I think all of us can use a little bit more of that in terms of your leadership, pulling in major people like that, your leadership as well. You know, when we started PleinAir magazine, as you know, or you may or may not know, but PleinAir magazine failed after 3 years. I put it out there, and the advertisers, the galleries said, we don't do PleinAir paintings. I said, but all great landscape paintings start in PleinAir. No, we won't advertise with you. And nobody buys PleinAir paintings. And then the art materials people out there said, nobody will, you know, that's too narrow of a category. Nobody buys art materials for PleinAir painting. I said, no, you want PleinAir painting because they're going to buy more because it's disposable. They're going to buy more panels, more paint. Nobody would support us. And so we went away, changed the name to Fine Art Connoisseur, and then brought it back later when the timing was better. So I think that it's an interesting time now that we're getting this acceptance and getting these museums. And I think we're really just at the very beginning of it. Looking on Instagram, if you look up the term PleinAir and you find the number of people following some of these Instagram accounts, I mean, there's tens of thousands of people.
Right.
And so, and lots of younger people too. So even though this kind of felt like and started out as a baby boomer thing because baby boomers had time and money and like to do travel, now we're seeing, you know, there are a lot of 20-year-olds out there in the audience and some students out there, and it's really changing.
Well, and because we've got more than a decade to talk about now, maybe closer to 2, when we can say, okay, when did the movement start? But we can watch the evolution of people's careers and styles, how they've gone into the studio and back outdoors, you know, different, again, as Al was talking about, like pushing boundaries and innovation. And I think, you know, what happens next, how do we continue forward, also has to do with inclusion. And it's not just inclusion of those boundaries that Al was talking about, but it's making sure that everybody knows that there's a home for each of you at PleinAir Easton, and you don't have to be one of the 58 artists to come participate. You know, just like this convention where you can come and learn and share and be part of a community, that community continues to grow, and events like ours should feel like a safe haven or a home with kindred spirits for you, and you should consider coming to attend. This year we're bringing back some featured alumni for the very first time. And the reason why we're doing it is there's such a demand on the artists who are there as the 58 competition painters, and we don't want to distract them from what they're doing in terms of their work. So we've kind of hired a few people to come back and work with us and produce more educational content and liaison more with the community so that we can have an even deeper connection. But what we're sort of saying is, even if you don't participate in our festival anymore, if you are a PleinAir Easton alumni, we want you to come home to Easton. You know, we want you to come continue to be a part and be a leader in the movement by sharing your successes since you have left the competition circuit back with the people who are still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to add that I feel that writers are very important to the movement. The visual is, yes, we can appreciate, we can look at it, understand it, touches our souls, as Jean was saying, but writers are critical. That's why PleinAir magazine is important, getting the writers to write about the art and the artists and talking about the movement. Publications in general are important. The more writers we have describing art, the artists, the movement, the more popular it will become and the more solidified and documented. I will say that I know when we started with the California Art Club, we understood that, and we started the newsletter. And sweetheart, now the newsletter started as a legal size paper front and back, and then it grew into now a 44-page journal that we put out, and it's about contemporary traditional art, historic traditional art.
And I should say that it is the best writing, better than the writing in our publications.
Oh, I know about that.
Seriously,
nice.
We bring in some wonderful...
Fabulous writing.
Sorry, staff.
No, it's all together.
Sorry, staff,
it comes all together. Then in our centennial year of the California Art Club, we were founded in 1909. So 2009, we approached Rizzoli International in New York, and asked if they'd be interested in doing a book on 100 years of landscapes. John Stern was involved with that. Molly Seipel, who writes in our newsletter, handled the contemporary part. Jean did the historic part. This book has 100 years documented landscape paintings of California. Then this became such a popular book with Rizzoli. They did several editions, and Amazon has now, they're almost sold out. But they came to us, Rizzoli came to us and said, we want to do another book. This is one of our best sellers. So, and in fact, this book, when Peter and I were in New York at the time, this book was displayed on their main table in the bookstore at the Metropolitan Museum.
Wow.
And now then they came and asked us to do another book. So we did Painting California. Again, Jean, we have a great formula now. Jean does the historic part, Molly Seipel the contemporary.
And you do the forward.
Well, I do the forward and manage it.
You do the forward.
But,
so.
which is an honor for me. But I mean, just luscious, luscious images of what the artists are doing, what they did in the past, and what the artists are doing today, and making that connection. And now Rizzoli editors have come to us and said, we want to do more books with you. So this is so great to be able to document. These books are selling throughout the world. It's internationally sold. And I think all of this, and John, the Irvine Museum, how many books have you done?
You know, thank you very much, but you brought something up very important, and so did you folks. And we were all there at the birth, and Plein-Air is like a teenager, a post-teenager. Now it's getting to be an adult, and this is where the museums come in. Because our museum at UC Irvine firmly believes that we are at a renaissance of painting right now, that this has gotten to be a serious and an historic period, which 50 years from now will be as important as the French Impressionists, as the regionalists, as any other really popular American movement. So
say that again.
Yes.
Make sure you caught
yes,
that.
Document
that.
That 50 years from now, these artists that are here, giving you instructions, that are here in the audience, that are here on the stage, are going to be as important as some of the great art movements of history. And to that end, we at the UCI Museum have begun collecting works by contemporary plein-air painters. And we had a show just this last 4 months where we hung maybe 10 of these beautiful paintings. And they were gorgeous big paintings by artists that are here. And we had constant comments that people did not know that artists painted this way. People thought that this type of art was in the past and that museums only handled contemporary, abstract, and all sorts of other art that, you know, people just don't immediately understand. They're subjective as opposed to objective. So we are starting the trend at the UC Irvine to establish these artists as a legitimate and important historical art movement. Give us about 10 years, we'll have a wonderful collection, and we will do a book, and we will do a traveling exhibition. We have works by some of the most important. We have currently on display a gorgeous still life by Jim McVicker. In the collection, there's a wonderful still life by Peter Adams. We have a large, beautiful night scene by Brian Mark Taylor. People love them. And the point is, if they don't see them, they don't know they're there. They're bombarded by contemporary art, by abstract, by expressionists. They feel that that's what art is today. And it is not. And we are making that point, and you're making that point. You folks are making that point. Maui, Laguna Plein-Air painters. There's a large audience that realizes that there is more to art than what you see in the big auctions and in the big articles, and that get these fantastic amount of money that hardly anybody can afford to buy. So this is it. You can get wonderful works of art by artists that are alive today. They're productive, they're inexpensive. Don't buy the name, buy what really reaches you deeply, and you will always love the painting. So
Yeah, and then your grandkids will reap the benefits.
Exactly. No, you're going to give them all to the Irvine Museum.
Oh, to the Irvine Museum.
He has to bequeath them.
We'll reap the benefits.
He only wants 10% of them.
As John and I were talking, one of my goals is to create another museum on the East Coast because I want to make sure that this is spread across the country evenly. I actually have had a couple offer to donate me a building and property to put up a museum of plein air painting in the East Coast near Washington, D.C. I have not accepted the offer yet. I've got a collection of 400 paintings. Some of them are good. And so I think the idea of the more of this, but I think what's even more important than that is getting recognition across the museums in your community, making sure that you're reaching out and educating the people in your community about this movement, because as John says, that's a pretty major statement to say this is going to be as big as the Impressionists. All right, Simi's going. Bye-bye, Simi. Thank you. I love you. So these things always go too fast, and we're going to have to wrap up here in a second. So what I'd like each of you to do is to kind of give just a final thing of something that you want to make sure is said, so that we get through it, because we got a tight day today. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
Elaine?
Well, I think that what we're saying is that by putting all these elements together, we're creating a strong interest in collecting contemporary and historic plein air paintings, and the artists who are working today are going to be the great artists being collected by museums in the future. Consistency and quality and a strong track record, that's what creates a collector interest.
Peter.
Pick up one of these newsletters as you leave. We have them on our desk at the California Art Club. They're free, and I think they're very informative. If you want, join the organization. We're also selling these books at the bookstore for, what is it, $45, down from markdown. To me, the most important thing is the artists, but then after that is the collectors. And getting more collectors involved. If you have friends, talk to them about collecting this great art. It's a movement, it's the future, and I think it's very important.
And I should mention that, and if you'll touch on what we discussed on the podcast, is that we're now finding that collectors are becoming painters. You guys want to touch on that?
And vice versa.
Right.
And vice versa.
So, right.
Sure. I mean, I guess my takeaway for everyone is just continue to strive for excellence and seek inspiration. I loved when John said, buy the things that move you. I would say paint the things that move you, travel to the places that move you. If you're feeling stale or stuck, surround yourself or connect yourself with somebody new who inspires you. Art is so amazing in that it erases the lines of politics. It can be such a powerful tool, but it's only powerful when you're really feeling it. So I just say, continue to go out and bring joy to your communities and bring joy into your own worlds. Like, make those choices, because that will ensure the future. In terms of who are the collectors, it's the people who love art, and so many people who love art are the people who aspire to produce it themselves. So, it is a takeaway if you're presenting an arts festival, or if you are presenting an exhibition about plein air painting. I think that those demos, like the ones that you've been seeing on these stages all week, are so important at breeding the collector base, because it shows how complicated and difficult and broad it all is. I think that there are so many people who want that education. They want to pick up their brushes. And as Al says, you've got to be the leader and encourage people to join you so that they can find that joy that I was talking about.
Al?
No, it certainly, for Plenary Easton, it has been a multi-year endeavor to try to create more educational content for the broader consumer of our festival. And why are we doing that? If you imagine an art collector to be some person who has methodically decided that they're going to enter this particular area and educate themselves and go, and that's not how it happens.
No.
Somebody runs into one of you out in the field and sees them painting, and is intrigued and sort of there's an awakening moment.
So they're ambassadors.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And once you have that beautiful oil painting hanging on, or watercolor hanging on your wall, your posters start looking really crappy. The framed things that have been hanging on your wall for years.
Yeah, it's that first painting that just like lights up the imagination. And some of those people say, hey, I could do that, and they start to take workshops and do other stuff. That's a one kind of entry point, and they still want to buy art. Yeah, and there's another person that starts collecting the baseball cards and looking at like who's out there and who's doing what, and they want to be who behaves much more in the sort of traditional collector way. But education is a really essential piece for both of these groups. And so what we've done is really create a whole lot of rich content over the course of about a week and a half that people can consume while there's this really intense competition happening, that then you get to see these paintings that just knock your socks off.
PleinAirEaston.com for the complete schedule.
And
there it is.
15 years?
This is our 15th year.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Yeah, we're happy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, after a long day at work and a hard drive on the freeways, I don't want to come home and be surrounded by art that ticks me off because I can't figure out what the hell it is. I want to touch the human side of who I am and who we all are. I want something that'll bring me back to humanity. So my advice to you folks is paint great art and buy great art.
Very good.
We're very privileged to have each of you here. These folks are the leaders in this movement. These folks have made a huge, major difference. I think, I don't know who came first. It doesn't matter. California Art Club has been a major influence in the worldwide plein air movement, so a round of applause for you. PleinAir Easton, obviously great leadership. You have set the best practices. You have one of the most, probably the most successful show in terms of painting sales and attendance and the thousands of people coming through. And that's done so much for us. So a round of applause for PleinAir Easton.
Yeah, you guys didn't
It's not us. There have been so many people who have worked so hard for PleinAir Easton. It is our community that really loves and supports the event.
But you rallied them together,
we have to give them a shout out too.
And of course, Jean Stern for his leadership. You've been absolutely magnificent. You've taught us the history. You've brought this to light to so many hundreds of thousands of people through your books and your articles. So Jean Stern, thank you. And I would like to say, just to reiterate, the future of plein air painting is strong, the present is strong, but it's up to you to keep it strong. You know, those of us who are on this panel may be in one of those pictures 100 years from now of, gee, I wish I could have been at an event like this. I mean, we all look at the pictures of Monet and friends in the cafes, and it's all, we romance about how cool it would have been. Imagine what would have happened to the world if they could have put something like this together to get all the great artists in Europe together. And you're at a special moment in time. This will not last forever. I think the plein air movement can last forever. A convention like this might not. And so this is a great thing for you, for your career, to encourage your friends to come back and learn. Jean Stern and I were talking about this. It's so important to come back and be a part of this community and get to know the other people. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've been here 8 times and I love it. I'll be here forever.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric.
Well, thanks again to Al Bond and Jessica Bellis, John Stern, Elaine and Peter Adams for discussing the plein air movement and its future. I think the future is very strong, but it's up to each of us to play a role and help other people learn about it and spread the word about plein air and what it means and so on. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. How about we do a marketing minute?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, we touch on your marketing questions. I'd like to get your questions. You can email them to me, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. This is meant to be just kind of a quick marketing thing, nothing too in-depth. Here are a couple questions I got at the Plein convention. This guy walked up to me and he asked me this. I'm not sure his name. I can picture him because he had kind of long gray hair and a hat. And he said, how do I balance doing what I love and making a living? Because he said, if I'm painting to sell, I don't feel right. And if I'm not selling, I can't survive. So, you know, and Joe Paquette was talking about on stage, you know, paint what you feel and paint what you love. And so what's your advice? I think that the answer has to be paint what you love. If you're not painting what you love, you're not enriching your soul, and you've got to paint what you love, and you've got to have that come through in your paintings. And quite frankly, I believe that if you're really learning how to do that, if you're really getting into it, it's going to come through in your paintings, and your paintings are going to speak to people, and they're going to find an audience, and people will buy them. But, you know, it's the old story. Sometimes that takes time, and you got to make a living. So how do you do it? How do you survive? Well, I've always said to myself, if my choice were painting or having to do an extra job to try to make a living, if I could make some money on painting in another way, I would do that. So I have a friend, for instance, who does commission work for another artist, and the other artist signs his name to it. Now, I don't think that's too cool, but this is something that somebody does. It's probably a little bit dishonest, and I don't think dishonest works. But for him, he's getting painting done, and he's getting paid, and he's not real proud of it. And again, I'm not suggesting it's a good thing to do, but it does happen. But here's another alternative. I'd say to myself, well, rather than cleaning toilets, I would rather be painting. So if I could paint something that sold, and I could get some income from something that sold, so that part of my time is devoted to generating income, and then the rest of the time I'm painting what I love, that's an option. But it's not a great option. You know, you might be better off to have a job on the side so that you're always painting what you love. Because if you're not painting what you love, you're not going to paint well, and you're not going to be into it. So I can't really solve that problem for him, but I think, you know, you got to make those decisions on your own. Ultimately, you got to paint what you love, because if you're not going to be happy. Another question I got from the convention, it was a long discussion, kind of had to sit down with this guy, and it took some time. And the guy really bared his soul, and so I'm not going to mention his name. I'm not sure I would know it anyway, but he said, you know, I'm scraping by. I'm not making a living as an artist. I've been teaching for a long time. I'm supporting myself as a teacher, teaching art, doing some odd job teaching. He said he was even delivering pizzas. He said, I'm not making anything. And I can't seem to get motivated. I can't seem to get out of this rut. I know I need to do it. I know I want to do it. I know I'm going nowhere. And I woke up, and it's been like 10 years I've been doing this, and I'm in a rut, and I'm not selling enough paintings. I'm in one gallery, and they're not selling much. How do I get out of this rut? And, you know, I don't know exactly what to say to something like that, but I think the first thing is you have to bottom out to the point where you have to make change. And I think this guy got to that point. You know, I remember digging change out of the couches and the car seats and under the floor mats and in the car, trying to come up with enough money to eat. I remember having moments where I was surviving on peanut butter and pickles and stale bread just to kind of get by, because I hadn't figured out how to make my money last. I wasn't making much of it. And those are the lessons we all have to learn. But you got to bottom out. And when I bottomed out, I said, you know, I can't do this anymore. And I got really aggressive. And all of a sudden that changed my motivation, changed my personality. And I think, you know, if you clearly want to do something, you're going to do it. You just got to jump on it. The other thing you have to understand is that nothing happens without action. You can't just dream it, this nonsense about dream it and it will come true. You know, there's some truth to it, but that truth comes by dreaming into action. You have to take action. I did a signature in my book. Somebody asked me to write some wisdom at the convention, and I said, your dreams will come true for you, but only if you take action. And that's what this is all about. So you have to get aggressive. You have to take action. First off, when I was trying to start my business, I was working 12 and 15-hour days when I started off, and I did it for years. I remember working sometimes 18 and 20 hours and sometimes wee hours in the morning. And, you know, I was trying things. Things were failing. I was experimenting. Nothing worked. I wasn't making any money. I just was, you know, I was struggling. But you just got to keep at it. You just have to keep working. And the second thing is you got to have a plan. And that's what I didn't do back then. I've since learned this, but you have to have a plan. You start with the desired income and the desired outcome. And by the way, don't make it unattainable. You know, if you say you're at zero today and you want to be at $1 million in a year, be realistic. You know, what could be realistically accomplished in a year, and stretch it a little bit, and then ask yourself, okay, the desired outcome is I want to make this much money. I want to be in this many shows. I want to be in this many galleries, etc. Work backwards. What are the steps you need to do? So let's just say that you need to sell, you got to bring in $3,000 a month. And to do that, you have to sell, you work backwards. You say, how many paintings do I have to sell to bring in $3,000? Well, maybe you have to sell 3 at $1,000. But if the gallery you only have one gallery and he or she only sells one painting, then in theory, you need 2 more galleries that only sell one painting. And, you know, you may know that you have to send them 3 paintings for every one that sells. And so you work backwards. You say, okay, now I need to sell $3,000 worth of paintings. I got to produce 9 paintings and get them out every month. And religiously, you just got to do that. You just got to figure that out. And you'll get a system, you'll get a rhythm, you'll figure out what works, how many paintings sell, and so on. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how many do I have to produce? How many do I have to mail? How many galleries do I have to get? How many galleries do I have to talk to get them? What steps to get them to invite me in? You know, everything you do, you got to work backwards. So for everything that you establish as an outcome, then say, well, what do I have to do to reach that outcome? And then when you get that, you step backwards and say, okay, what do I have to reach that outcome? Anyway, that's how it works. I hope this helps. Anyway, kind of looking forward to Denver already. PleinAir convention in Colorado. I met a ton of people at the convention who came there because of the PleinAir podcast. So I'm really honored. Thank you very much for listening. People are telling me they listen in their studios or their cars. And yeah, this one guy, he told me he drove out to the PleinAir convention. I don't know where he came from, but he said he was in the car for a couple of days. He said he listened to the PleinAir podcast continuously the whole time. That poor man. He's brave. I also had a lot of people who came to the convention who told me they learned about it through reading Sunday Coffee that somebody had forwarded to them. If you haven't seen Sunday Coffee, it's a thing I do on Sunday mornings. It's sometimes about art, but it's about life and just thoughts in general. I started writing it for my kids. They don't read it, of course, because they're teenagers. But anyway, it's just kind of a way for me to get some writing therapy. I love to write. And so anyway, if you want to learn about that, it's at coffeewitheric.com. You sign up for free. It comes every Sunday morning when I feel like doing it. Sometimes I don't feel like doing it, but most times I do. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. I mean, hey, what's not to love? PleinAir painting. Let's do this again sometime like next week. I will see you then. My name is Eric Rhodes. I'm the publisher and the founder of PleinAir magazine. And you need a subscription to PleinAir magazine if you don't have one. If you're listening to this, go to Barnes & Noble. It's the #1 selling magazine in the arts and photography category at Barnes & Noble nationwide. If they're out of it, it's because they're out of it. They sell out a lot, but go get it and then get a subscription so you don't have to make the trip to the newsstand. It's about half the price. And we'll see you next time. Go paint.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhodes. You can help spread the word about PleinAir painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 PleinAir painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.